Veterans in Transition is sponsored by HireVeteransFirst.com, Jelani Consulting, and Village Connector Community.
Welcome to Veterans in Transition, where we promote the veteran community. Each week, we travel around the region highlighting veteran-related news, issues, and events. We tell you a story. March. What comes to mind? Springtime, March Madness, or Women's History Month? As we celebrate Women's History Month, learn more about milestones in women's history by visiting a museum, or men, acknowledge the remarkable women in your life. And now here's this week's business tip with Stacey Redmond.
How to handle a changing team. The business world is constantly changing. There's nothing easy about losing a valuable team member and consequently training a replacement. But there are ways to make the process less painful and manage a changing team. First, you have to have documented processes in place. Without them, there's no clear path forward. Second, make sure that each new member is brought on board in the same way so that expectations are set appropriately and there's no confusion. Finally, don't dwell in the past. Focus on the people you have now and meet regularly as you coalesce into a united whole. Change is part of business. Sometimes it can be tough, but it doesn't have to be.
In this episode, we celebrate the month with Women's Veteran Rock, an organization that advocates for strengthening America's military families.
I want you all to start putting on your thinking caps because we're going to flip the next one or two questions to you. But before we do that, I'd just like to ask each of you that are military women who have aspired and actually achieved a position in public leadership, what is the most challenging? Diane, let's start with you. What is the most challenging thing that you see working in public leadership? You indicated that many of the places that you go, they don't view you as the national legislative director. So what are some of the challenging things that you faced in public leadership?
Well, you know, it's interesting. If I take my executive director to a Hill appointment, because I am, as a national legislative director, I'm also their lobbyist. So, you know, I'm helping write legislation and pushing to get good things passed and stop the bad stuff. But if I take my ED with me, and we meet with a member of Congress, they will immediately, you know, shake his hand and even if he hasn't said anything, ask him what branch of service he was in, and they'll talk about that. And they will never, no one has ever said that to me. And my boss has had to say, Diane was in the Army, you know, and it's like an afterthought because they just don't get it. And I think really that is one of the biggest, besides gridlock and partisanship on the Hill, recognition that, you know, you're a woman, yeah, but you're also a veteran.
So how are you overcoming that? Because obviously, I mean, this is the second time that you've mentioned that you face these barriers, these walls, that people aren't recognizing you both as a military person as well as a woman. What are you doing to overcome those challenges?
Well, here's one of the things that I do. I like to wear things that indicate that I am, in fact, a veteran. Of course, I can't wear this on the Hill, but just wearing it around the communities, I think, you know, people look at me funny. Like, really? They just don't expect it. So just education, but little displays. You can't be out there being obnoxious or, you know, or ridiculous about it. But, you know, I'm proud of the fact that I served in the military. So just talk, let people know, and maybe I should introduce myself. I had something added to my cards. It never used to say, but now it says U.S. Army veteran on my card. So when I hand out my card,
smart move.
Hopefully they'll, you know, So
Well, thank
that's
you.
one
Those are
thought.
all very good tips. Anna, you work in benefits area, and many of the services that you provide are really quite extensive. And as I come to each one of you, I really would like for you to talk a little bit about those services, but I'd like for you to talk about the services that you provide through your agency. But I also want you to describe how do you see military women emerging into leadership? Obviously, you all represent it. Many of the people that are here represent women who are emerging. So first, tell us a little bit about the services that you provide, and then also I'd like for you to talk a little bit about women emerging into military women emerging into public leadership.
Great, love that question. Well, a little bit about what I do. I am the Assistant Director of the Benefits Assistance Service Policy, Procedures, and Outreach staff. I have what I call targeted outreach to every demographic. And so the very first thing I try to do is I try to recruit a very diverse workforce. I was talking to Deborah earlier, and I told her, and I love what Diane said about, how we're not, sometimes not recognized, because and I opened my speech purposely to say that I'm every woman, because sometimes we get lost in those titles as a mother, as a wife, as a sister, and we kind of see ourselves shrinking little bit back in the background, your veteran status, but it's something we should be proud of. So for women in the military, stay engaged not just in the military, but in the community. Network with other women in the community, and all of us are important, no matter what your role is. Give back. One of the biggest things that I see myself doing is trying to give back what the opportunities that have been provided for me. I had to struggle for a lot of them, and I'm pretty sure every woman on this panel has had that same challenge, that we've had to really earn what our place. And no one's going to say, take your place, Nancy, take your place, Anna. You're going to have to say, this is my place, this is my day, this is my time. And you have to step up and take it.
Terrific advice, because as I look around the room, the women that are here, I see them actually living that sort of reality every single day. So thank you for that information and also that wisdom. Betty, I'd like to ask a question for you. You introduce yourself, and you're serving as the acting director of the Center for Women Veterans. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you see military women evolving into senior roles like yourself and like this kind of role?
I too was an E1 one day. And so we all know we can do it all. And so remember those characteristics, those things that we did when we were in uniform. We volunteered for everything. I call it voluntold. We always managed the program. If a program had, or a luncheon or something had to be done, it was always us, even though our name wasn't on there as a project manager. We were always doing it. And I think it's just characteristics like that where we don't wait to be told to do something, we do it. And through the years, that's just what organizations, especially the federal government, sees. Sure. Because I must tell you that my mother was an Army woman. Yeah. And my dad was an Air Force man. And they had a little Marine. Yeah. So, who would have ever thought it? So, I never remember having a conversation with my mom saying, Mom, what should I know when I go on the Yellow Footprints? Mm-hmm. It was the things that she instilled from me from day one that I just continued once I put the uniform on. And then as I went through, the Marines in 1978, that's no joke. Mm-hmm. And federal government, that's no joke. And so every day we must come in with that armor, no matter what job, no matter what position we are. And I can tell you in 1992, when they were offering early outs from the staff NCOs, remember that? It took me 1 minute to make the decision that I was gone. You're offering me money to get out? Goodbye. Aloha. So I was gone. But 14 years of wonderful prep for the life that was my next piece of my journey. I came in, I didn't know any better. I was a Marine, didn't know any better. They were offering, when I was checking out, we all have the checkout sheet, somebody said, oh, there's an admin job at the MWR. And I didn't even ask what salary it was. I said, oh, I'll take it. It was a GS5. And before I knew it, within a year, I was running the place. And people would come in and say, oh, you're GS12. Well, where is she? And I said, well, I can take care of you, because that's what all of us have been raised to do. We've always been ready for our next job.
Yep.
So now what you have to do, once you have all the characteristics, because you already got that, now you have to get what's on paper. And that's what took me a long time to figure out, because I didn't know how important an education was. I was a Marine. I was a staff sergeant. I could do anything. Just like all of you can do everything. But you've got to have that academic education on your resume. You've got to network. You've got to look at the women that are already there and ask them, build that network, build that weaving. Look at sororities. Look at other groups that have it together, that have strong women that have made it. Because there is nothing special that I did to land me here other than pray daily.
Amen.
And to always be ready, have the resume ready when the calling comes. Because I never knew that I would be acting director. I never knew I would be associate director. What I told the young ladies at the Bass, that's where I started in VA, at a regional office on the front lines, taking abuse from veterans. And you know what? If you can do that, because you know it, and then you start figuring out that it's not abuse, it's that they don't know. No one's ever told them what the rules and regulations are. And so once there's a person that's knowledgeable, if you know the benefits of VA, you are golden. And you are eligible for any other job, any other place. So, and that is what has kept me alive and kept me going. And before I know it, July of this year, I'm eligible to retire. It has been an awesome ride, an awesome ride.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I appreciate you sharing with people about the preparation and being ready, because when you have this opportunity to be able to say, I'll take that assignment, I'll take that job. And I think having a spirit of readiness is something that's really, really important. So thank you for that. Nancy, I'm going to go down to you and have you tell us a little bit about the agency in which you work with, because we have heard individuals on our panel. Diane said about joining organizations, VSOs. I'd like for you to tell us two things. Number one, a little bit about your organization. And secondly, I'd like for you to talk about the importance of women getting involved on special committees, special assignments, the places in which we can affect a change by volunteering in some unique way.
Sure. So I'm with Department of Labor, like I said, and I actually did bring some handouts, so I want to point them out so you can refer to them for more than I'll have time to say here. So these three, they were in the right-hand side of my folder, are the ones I brought. The Department of Labor has actually always supported women veterans, long before we had a women veteran program. And if you take a look later at your DOL Supports Veterans program, you can see some of the many ways that the department actually supports veterans with priority of service for all of our programs. And apprenticeships and a lot of things. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about some of those. We also have Women's Bureau at Department of Labor, and Lucia Bruce in the back there, she's retired now, but she was with Women's Bureau for how long?
For about 20 some odd years.
20 some odd years, yes. And so, I always tell people that, yes, isn't that wonderful? So what I often, and sometimes, I work in Veterans Employment and Training Service. our agency is 86% veterans. So there are days when I have to explain to my colleagues the importance of other agencies within the building, primarily Women's Bureau, because they work to formulate policies and standards that help all working women. And I can tell you that veterans are not immune to women's issues. Wage gap is a very real thing, as are many things. The fact that women are more likely than men to experience poverty, to be concentrated in low-wage occupations, to earn the minimum wage, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess the reason why wage gap always pops into my head first, a couple of things. I think that overlap of veteran issues and women issues, wage gap is a primary one to me when I look at that overlap because of salary negotiation. Most of us get out of the military not understanding salary negotiation, right? And then if you add to that a wage gap where women have to fight even harder to earn the same amount of money for doing the same work, and women have very different negotiating skills than men do. So it's kind of one of these, well, what do I do? Do I act like him and then I'm frowned upon for not being feminine? Or do I act feminine and then I take less than I'm worth? I mean, it's really tough. And we have found that with the services that I'm going to get to, for women veterans who utilize them, we actually see less of a wage gap. I'm not going to lie to you, it is still there. But we have less of a wage gap than women veterans who do not utilize the services or women non-veterans who use comparable services. So, I strongly encourage people to use those. Now, the agency that I directly fall under, Veterans Employment and Training Service, how many of you went through TAP, Transition Assistance Program, when you separated? So there would have been, depending on when you went through, maybe 2 days, maybe 2.5, now it's 3, dedicated only to the employment workshop. That's us. We currently have contractors do it because we see more consistency and that's all they do. I used to do that. I did that for quite some time. I loved it. I want you to know that is not only now mandatory because so many people didn't get to go because their commander wouldn't let them or didn't see the value in it, et cetera, et cetera. We didn't fight for it to become mandatory to punish people who don't want to go. We pushed for that so that everybody would have their leadership's approval and support to go. And so that then leaves the problem of, well, what about me? I got out before it was mandatory. Well, it's not as good, but we do have second best. And so I want you to know that we have an online version of the Employment Assistance webinar, and it's publicly available. So really anybody, a civilian could use it. So if you just want a refresher, if you went through it, want to do it again, never went through it, you could use that at any time. You can download the manual. Another thing that the agency that I work for does, we fund certain positions let me back up a step. The Department of Labor funds almost 2,500 American Job Centers nationwide. Now, I call them American Job Centers because I work here in DC and they all have different names and I cannot remember 2,500 names. But so it can be very confusing. But if you go to one website, servicelocator.org, and you may see other websites with the same thing, they'll be rerouting because we're government, we like to make it as confusing as possible. I stick to that one website to tell people just to keep it as simple as possible. And I tell people, if you know nothing else, don't worry about remembering my name. Remember this website, servicelocator.org. Type in your zip code, and that will pull up a list of American Job Centers within whatever radius you're willing to go. They may have different names. You can click on any of those, and that'll pull up more information about the individual one. Look for the veteran representative contact information. Contact that person. Tell them you are a veteran. We are working very hard to ensure that the staff does not continue to make assumptions that you're a spouse. But you know as well as I do, that's a drop in the bucket every day, right? So please tell them that you are a veteran, and that will help train our staff as well. Now, at these American Job Centers, they have partnerships with a lot of different agencies, local, state, federal level. So it kind of is like one-stop shopping. Now, my focus is employment. So all the services I'm talking about are employment, resumes, interview practice, connections with employers, help identifying your skill set, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But let's say you come in and you're struggling with other things. Let's say you need some assistance, get with some of the SNAP, for example, or some of these other assistance programs. We want you to be connected to those so that you can then focus on employment, and we think they complement each other. So the biggest issue that I've seen in my current role, where I do a lot of analysis on, what problems are we still having, are our services meeting the needs of women veterans? The biggest problem I see is a lack of awareness about the services. In fact, I've yet to be at a single event where somebody didn't come up to me and say, why did I never know this? So we did create, and this is in your folders as well, we created an Employment Assistance for Women Veterans webinar online. It's not a sexy webinar. It's not something to watch when your Netflix is out. And there's a reason for that. I spent a lot of time on this, and so I can painfully tell you it's text heavy, and there's a reason for that. The VA has a definition for veterans. DOL has a definition for veterans. We've got an additional one for our significant barriers to employment. So we spelled out everything. And so it's available in two formats. One is YouTube video. If you don't want to listen to my voice for 31 minutes, then don't. You can go to the second option, which is download the PowerPoints, which do have audio embedded in each one. You can play it or not. But we created it that way so that service providers or delegates like yourself could download the PowerPoints and just take what you need, so that you can be able to tell the women that you're helping, oh, 1 day on active duty service? Yes, that means you get priority of service at an American Job Center. Here it is on slide 6. So please take advantage of those. And with that, I am sure I exceeded my time. Thank you so much for your patience.
Lovingly, we thank you for that, Miss Nancy. Ladies, you've had an opportunity to meet these wonderful people on our panel. Now, panelists, I want you to meet our audience. Now, these ladies have come here. Many of them have graduated from the Women Veterans Civic Leadership Institute. They are representatives of the networks that we have around in many states. We have North Carolina and Pennsylvania, New Jersey and Delaware, and of course, the District of Columbia and Maryland. And if I missed anyone, my apologies. I'd like to be able to open the floor up to you. You've learned about the kind of expertise and the leadership that's here. You have an opportunity as a delegation as a whole and as individuals to ask questions directly. So it's not just the women that are here. We have these lovely cadets in the audience. So if you have questions, so I'm going to open the floor up to questions. And if you have questions, I'm going to ask if you would come to this microphone. So we're going to take the first question. And for those of you who have questions following that, we'll ask if you'll please stand in line behind them.
Thank you so much for providing us a positive depiction of what a veteran does after military service. How is it that we have all of these programs that are designed to hire veterans? We have the work, we see all the work fairs. We see all of those things publicized, but once we're there, we're not actually employed. As veterans, we have been responsible, I know for almost 3 decades, I have been responsible for the food of veterans, the health care of veterans, the lives of veterans. Every aspect of our lives is what we perform for one another in the military. Yet, when we transfer that to society as less than 1% of people, how is it that then we're then dropped off at the door and then not able to continue taking care of one another?
I think part of the problem is that many of the people that are involved in these programs, certainly not the people that we have here, but there are many others, they do not understand the experience, they don't have a good understanding of what you've done. You could be a company commander and have, 20,000 troops under your leadership, and you could be responsible for a $10 billion budget. But when you get out into the civilian world, if you're not dealing with a veteran, they don't know what a company commander does. They don't understand your experience. Mm-hmm. And to me, that is one of the biggest problems that veterans have in trying to find jobs in the civilian community.
Well, I was going to say, I think that that's a great response about they don't understand about the transferability of skills. That's the reason why it becomes incumbent upon us, and that's what you said in your introduction, how important it is for us to become involved in veteran service organizations. Now, I know you all love and adore Women Veterans Rock, and that's just one veteran service organization. We have many organizations that's represented, and we have to be able to have some clarity and some sincerity in the voice that we bring to the table. And consistency and diligence is very important too. So I think that to be able to have people recognize this gap that continues to exist, and then it becomes incumbent upon us, like Betty suggested earlier, when those opportunities are there, we have to fill in the gap and give voice to it. And you have to remember, more important than even belonging to a veteran service organization, it is a 4-letter word, and it begins with the V. It's what, ladies? Vote. V-O-T-E. Vote. You have an opportunity to vote in representatives that represent your interests and your issues. You also have the power to vote them out who don't represent your issues and interests. This is not a partisan statement. This is a statement that is directed to all citizens. We need to be a part of the process, and voting is the most important way to do that.
That's all for this edition of Veterans in Transition. We encourage you to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. If you have a story idea, reach out to us at vetsintransition.com. Remember, we all have a story to tell. Until next time.